But we're here today to talk to Geraldine and ask her a few questions, Geraldine, about your fabulous bookstore, somewhere we've all been to but perhaps don't know very much about.
Yeah.
So, what does the history of the 999-year history of this place mean to you?
It's only 99 so far.
99.
99 and 3/4. So we're, it means the world to my daughter Geraldine Beskin and I, basically. We thrive on it. We like being enablers for people to find an inner spiritual life, however they like to work it. And that gives us great pleasure. We see people come in and they develop. And being a part of that is an absolute honour with people. And as a family business, it means a tremendous amount as well. I've been here with Barley for nearly 20 years now. I was here with my mother for I don't know how many years. And she then took it over because my dad had died. And so it has run through our family since the late 1950s, and it's a strange little shop, but we pack a mighty punch, as I say, really. But we have an awful lot of stock. We don't have multiple copies of things on shelves. We have individual books, and so the sections come and go, they expand, they contract. But we do new books and second hand, so that's always very, very interesting. And overall, it means a lot to us, and we're pleased that it means a lot to other people as well.
Which makes me think, what's the most popular thing that people come into your bookshop for? Just a one-liner?
Currently it's tarot, but what is also good is many more men are reading the tarot now. So the symbols,
really? Who are these people?
They're working on their subconscious, and it's fantastic. Wonderful.
So how do you feel about us Rosicrucian Freemasons coming here as part of the Metropolitan Study Group and using this for our study group meetings?
We're absolutely delighted because you're a kind of offshoot of Masonry. We've always been considered the wrong side of the blanket, as it were, in terms of mystical work, because we're magical. Watkins started off coming out and backed by the Theosophical Society, and they were always mystical, and quite rightly so. We were always magical, and that's always been rather more frowned upon. Now we are very much, thanks to Harry Potter and our customer J.K. Rowling, we are very much, she went public, so now we can, very much in the mainstream. And we like that. We like the energy that it brings and how it's acceptable to be interested now. But the Western mysteries are so important to us. And I'm not a little Englander, I'm more of a mad Celt, really, but I like the fact that the stuff to do with the British Isles is making sense to an awful lot of people now. And the folklore sections, just how we used to do it, a lot of that is hokum, really. I don't practice the way my grandmother did. I don't even practice the way my mother did. Barley doesn't practice the way I do. It evolves, all of this. And like the music, when 150 years ago, when the SRIA started, they may well have started with a patriotic song or something to settle people down and to get them opened up to what might be about to happen. And to have such a modern piece created specially for you is very, very, very thrilling. And I like the fact that now you don't have to just be there on the night. You can catch up with things when it suits you as well. And it's a wonderful time to be involved with all of this. And as I say, we are deeply, deeply honoured and very pleased to have you here.
Well, I have to say, Harry Potter, it's really interesting to read some of the old papers that came out when the first Harry Potter books came out, and how the Rosicrucians at the time were absolutely enthralled that, the children are asking after what Daddy does at the weekend.
Yeah. But one of the best things about those books were that they made the world literate again.
Yes.
They didn't have pictures, and the parents and the grandparents read them as well as the children, and the whole world became literate again. And then it was about magic.
You weren't a proper dad unless you'd read Harry Potter.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So what does televising this, or video conferencing, or communicating out of Atlantis Bookshops mean to you? How important is this medium?
I think it's great. We've always been very poor at communicating with the world. We kind of know that people will find us. We've rather relied on that to some extent. We're about not to. Next year we're going to be 100 and we're going to be so
Slick.
Modern. I won't be allowed to touch anything ever, except possibly put the kettle on.
Would you like me to get that in writing?
Yeah, no, it's well known. So no, I think it's absolutely excellent. It's the world is a clever place now, and we can shape it to suit us. It's good.
Humour is important, but now, where are you in your spiritual journey?
I'm becoming more abstract about things in a way. During lockdown, I spent the first few months sitting on the couch saying we're doomed. And then I sort of lay on the couch and watched telly till about 4 a.m, and I was really no use at all. And then Barley said, I never swore at my mother, but Barley swore at me that particular day and basically said, get a grip. There's a business that I'm running on my own here. I need you back. And so my reading was familiar things, and I found Yeats and Blake and all those standards in our worlds very, very good for me, because they fed me on an emotional, spiritual level, and they weren't demanding that I stood on my hind legs and did formalised rituals or anything like that, but they nourished me, as they always have.
Do you ever stop reading as the owner of a bookshop? One of the questions I ask you.
Yeah, I like a nice murder on the bus.
Right, night off, murder on the bus. Okay, that sounds absolutely right. Which leads me nicely to, apparently, you found something new and exciting in the British Museum about William Westcott. Would you like to share that with us?
Oh yes. It was what he happened to, or did or didn't happen to him in the museum. That I was reading Yeats, and he said that he used to work with a man who had no ability as a seer at all, but he could press the right buttons, as it were, magically, for things to manifest. He had happened to have a very beautiful wife who was a terribly good seeress, and so the timing is that it was Mathers and Mina Mathers he was talking about. And they used to meet outside London, and they, which was basically Forest Hill, which is a suburb of London now, but they met in the, he worked for the collector of objects from around the world, who had opened his collection to the world, and he was by the gardens and all the rest of it. So that's obviously the Horniman Museum.
Horniman Museum. I was trying to help you there.
So, yes. Well, Mathers lived in Stent Lodge there, but I actually think from my own research is that he lived in the stable above the stables there, which would have made much more sense, because he didn't have a particularly good job at the museum, which was just being set up at the time. And because there was accommodation above the stables, I think that's where they were. But Mathers, had a chart with lots of numbers and bright coloured things on there, and a wooden mace, and he activated the right numbers, and this seeress was able to conjure things which Yeats could then see for himself, and the three of them would then share a vision. And on one classic occasion, they broke off, had dinner, and went back in, and the seer was still there waiting for it. The vision was still there waiting for them.
Do you mean they didn't? Seers don't drink online then?
I don't know, but but then some years later, he was in Paris, and he'd come home late the night before, so nobody in the household had seen him. He was staying with friends. He had then gone out before breakfast to get a newspaper, and as he said, he was just telling himself one of those stories that, oh blimey, if such and such had happened, then I would have broken my arm, or all these, not just these, if I hadn't missed that coach and horses kind of idea, or it hadn't missed me, I could have broken my arm. So he went in, and the maid was laying the table for breakfast. She saw him and told the mistress of the house she'd seen Yeats with his arm bandaged, which was at the time he was thinking about that. And then when he went down to breakfast properly, and the hostess said, what's happened to your arm? Is it better? Did you get run over last night? And these were all the thoughts that he'd had. So then a little while later, he was still in France, and he had a message he wanted to send to a friend who was hundreds of miles away, and he couldn't work out how to put it in a letter and didn't particularly want to put it in a letter. So he appeared in a crowded hotel lobby to his friend. Nobody else could see him. He couldn't speak to his friend, but the friend managed to communicate, "Come and see me later when it's quiet." So that night, he appeared to his friend, told him the message, and when they caught up, Yeats was able to say, "I had no idea I'd done that he'd been able to separate himself." So, in March 1888, Mina Mathers is initiated into the Golden Dawn, and they really didn't know what was going to happen, doing this live actual magic and with a woman as well. They didn't know if she would turn into, a green mass. They didn't know if she would disappear. They really had no idea what she had agreed to do. Anyway, the Golden Dawn is set up. A month later, Westcott says, "I'll meet the Reverend Lemon and Mr. A.B., whoever that may be, in the reading room of the British Museum." If you haven't ever seen the reading room, it's one of the losses to London that they have blocked it all off now. Just Google it. It is simply spectacular. And they could still have their bloody exhibitions and light the ceiling, they light the dome, it would be good. Anyway, so he's meant to go there. He overnight develops a nasty chesty cough, so he can't get there for the next day, which is Friday the 13th. Of April 1888. So he can't make it, can't tell his friends. So meanwhile, one of them turns up and says to a man who's in charge of the umbrellas, "Have you seen Westcott?" And he said, "Yes, he's over in his usual seat." And this person didn't, and because he'd seen him wandering about and then go to sit in his normal seat. Then he couldn't find him. So he asked another friend of theirs, a woman this time, who, if she'd seen him, and she said, "Yeah, he should be over there, there's his seat." And she saw him, but Westcott was in bed, with, a hot poultice on his chest kind of idea. He really was not there. And that became quite a famous thing. And it obviously niggled them to some extent, because 10 years later, her name was Ellen. I can't remember her surname. Anyway, she wrote a testimonial saying exactly what she had seen that day. It was a story that didn't lie down amongst them, really. So that was good. And then the only other time I've been involved with anybody who could bilocate was with your ex-Supreme Magus, Andrew Stevenson.
Right.
I loved Andrew. I just thought he was darling, and very encouraging. And one of the orders that he was involved with, they discussed for 17 years whether to let women in or not. And eventually Bob Gilbert took along Marjorie Debenham, the supremely marvellous Marjorie Debenham. And she said, "Well, of course I was a member. Don't be silly." And so myself and another lady then joined. She dropped out, so I stayed with it. But so I loved Andrew. Anyway, worst housekeeper in the universe. You couldn't find his vacuum cleaner for dust. It was incredible.
I never went to his house.
Oh,
Greatest sorrow I have. I hear so much about it.
Proper organised chaos. Brilliant. Anyway, we used to go to discreet meetings in the afternoon at a house in North London. And one day, it didn't have a name, it wasn't a society or anything like that. We just used to get together and see what happened. And Andrew turned up one day, late, which was unusual for him, and quiet. And he was a quiet man anyway, but he was just quiet throughout the thing. And then he left early. The next time we met, we said, "Well, what happened to you last time?" And he said, "You were very quiet." And he said, "Well, I wasn't there." And we said, "Yeah, but you were." And he said, "But I wasn't." And he'd been at a Masonic meeting. And the minutes showed he had been at a Masonic meeting. And then he leant in and he said, "Thing is, Geraldine, whenever you're in two places, you're never very effective in the second place."
I thought you were going to tell the story about him seeing somebody on the street coming out of a door which obviously meant that this man was having an affair with somebody, and he was a very close friend and associate, and he'd kept that very much to himself. But that wasn't being in two places at one place, that was being in the wrong place.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Do we have any more questions for Geraldine from the floor? If not, I'd like to thank you. Thank you for having us here. I know I'm going to enjoy coming to study group meetings here, and I'm sure everybody who's here and knows you will. And I'm sorry we're going to have to let you be involved.
It'll be an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.